For years, hormone therapy has been one of the most avoided treatment options for women in menopause, largely because of concerns around risk. But what happens when the information that shaped those concerns starts to change? Then the real question becomes, what should you do today with what we now know to make the right decisions for your body? So Star, when did you first start seeing that the public narrative around hormone therapy for women in menopause did not fully match what you were seeing in your work with people?
Well, that's a great starting question, Tim, because there has been decades of narrative out there that hormone therapy is not good for you and it's dangerous. But as more and more light was shed on the data that actually came out and additional research information, we saw that narrative is very outdated. And for that reason, I feel like this conversation is so timely to discuss how this public perception is so much more different than what we're actually seeing in the data and out there.
And so, that discussion we're going to have today is not just about whether hormone therapy is right or wrong. It's about understanding what changed in that data that you saw there, what hormone therapy actually does, and how to think about it going forward. Joining us is Star Zakian, PharmD, who leads our Thrive Through Menopause Lane and works directly with women navigating hormone therapy, medication safety, and individualized care concerns. And you're watching WellWaveNOW, and this is where timeless wisdom lights your wellness path. So let's start with what happens in menopause and what the concerns around hormone therapy are in terms of it helping with the resulting challenges from the changes that happen in menopause.
Sure, let's start. So when we speak about menopause, it's a transition. Yes, by clinical diagnosis, menopause means your regular cycles, you have stopped having them for 12 consecutive months. So that marks the clinical diagnosis that you're in menopause. But what this conversation is going to include is this entire menopause transition, which includes years before this menopause and even years afterwards, where women are seeing decline in the amount of estrogen and progesterone that their bodies are making. And not only the decline, but also this erratic up and down amounts of estrogen that sometimes are circulating in the body that are causing so many symptoms that are significantly impacting the quality of lives of our women.
And so let's talk about some of those challenges. How does it impact the quality of life in menopause?
Well, we've been used to having, at least most women, regular rhythmic cycles of estrogen going up and going down and progesterone going up and going down. But over time, which is such a natural process where a woman's number of follicles has declined, we have less amount of hormones being produced. And when we have less amounts of hormones being produced, the brain sends out all these stimulating hormones saying, make more hormones, make more hormones. I'm not used to not having enough hormones in me. And as a result, we get these spikes of estrogen that are affecting women and getting, effects such as hot flashes and night sweats. And we have moments of brain fog and other things such as sleep disturbances, and not to mention things we're going to talk about later, such as vaginal and urinary related issues, all of a sudden just starting, and you're just asking yourself, where did this all start from? And it's this fluctuating hormone.
So for Bob's leading forward. He's really interested in, but for thousands, perhaps millions of years, there's a big debate about how long human beings have been around. Women just kind of toughed this out, didn't they? Or were there some natural things? So first, hubbubaloo about hormone therapy. Why not just continue to tough it out until you get through that phase, Star?
Of course, Tim. Well, let's put it this way: the life expectancy in the 1800s and even in the early 1900s wasn't that high. It was in the 50s, the 60s. You were lucky if you could live longer than that. And menopause transition typically on average happens in your 50s, early 50s. The average age is 51. So as time has gone on, more women are living longer. And as we are living longer, as of now in the 2026 year that we are seeing that the life expectancy of women can be as high as 80 or 90. And if there are ways that can help improve this transitional period, why not use them? And for the narrative, hormone replacement therapy is not new. And we can talk about this later. Medications for hormone therapy have been out since the 1940s. So women have been using hormone therapy replacement for their menopausal symptoms all the way from the 40s and 50s.
Since Bob was a kid.
You're tough on them.
No, hey, you're one of our longevity people, so it's good that you still look like you did having been a kid in the 40s. So, given that they've been around since the 40s, where does all this fear about hormone therapy come from?
Well, everybody was going along their day from the 40s, 50s, all the way up to early 2000. Before any kind of information came out, menopause hormone therapy was one of the top prescribed medications in the 90s. Almost many of the women, I'm not going to say all women, but a great majority of the women were receiving menopause hormone therapy for their menopausal symptoms at that time. So one day there is this public announcement that gets made. This is in year 2002, where we see on the news and all over the headlines, menopause hormone therapy increases the risk of breast cancer, blood clots, and stroke.
Now, was that this Women's Health Initiative study that, so that was that.
It was from the Women's Health Initiative study, yes.
And so who did that? Who did that study?
So the Women's Health Initiative study was actually a very large government-funded study where it started in the early 90s, where they were asking the question, when starting menopause hormone therapy after menopause, are we going to see prevention of heart disease? So a lot of women are taking it and they really wanted to see, are we going to see prevention in heart disease in people who are postmenopausal? And at the same time, they wanted to measure and make sure that we're not seeing high breast cancer risk. So the government rolled out this study. They got 27,000 women enrolled in this study to take hormone therapy after their menopause had set in. And I could talk about the details more, but I'm going to slow down. But that's how basically the context of the study was.
And so I kind of took you, by asking you kind of what was the source, I think I took you off track there for a second. So go back to what were the takeaways from that study that said that really then got everybody up in arms?
So just to take a couple of steps back here. So when the announcement came out in the public saying hormone therapy in postmenopausal women increases the risk of breast cancer, blood clots, and stroke, the data was not wrong. The data was what the data was, but how it was interpreted was the issue. And before we even go into the interpretation, it's important to understand who was studied in this study. Like, what is this data representing? And the average age of women in this study was 63 years of age. And most of them were more than 10 years out post-menopause receiving these hormone therapies. I mean, when we talk about just these numbers alone, this is not the average woman these days who is seeking menopause hormone therapy. These are much, much older women compared to people who transition to menopause. And what was studied was a specific formulation of hormone therapy. It was an oral estrogen therapy that is actually made from the urine of pregnant horses. One strength, that's the estrogen. And so we have a lot more other formulations available, different dosages available, but this is what was studied. The way that the women receive this hormone therapy, I think it's important to lay it out as well, is that women who have an intact uterus, meaning that they have not had hysterectomy, they need to take estrogen and progesterone. So the women who had their intact uterus receive estrogen and progesterone, both of them oral, and as I mentioned, the estrogen preparation. And then women who did not have an intact uterus, they were receiving estrogen only, the same oral estrogen I spoke about. And a lot of the risk that they noticed was actually in the group of women who were receiving the estrogen and the progesterone together. And so without doing too much crazy analysis, making a statement saying that hormone therapy increases the risk of all these conditions that I mentioned for all women was just this blanket statement, black and white, that was made across every woman. And so that was misleading. That was a very misleading statement that came out in 2002.
Okay.
Once that happens, it's out there in the public and there's almost no pulling it back. It obviously had long-term implications. And I like the fact that go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you're so right, Bob, because overnight we saw a huge plummet of use of menopause hormone therapy, upwards of 90%. Women were not comfortable taking it. The providers were not comfortable prescribing. So overnight, 90% plummet of the use of these agents.
Yeah, crazy.
I want to come back to the data here a little bit. But one thing you said, I think, requires some additional explanation, which is, so if you got an intact uterus, why do I need to take both progesterone and estrogen? If it would seem to me that it would be the people who did not have the intact uterus that would need kind of two things. So what's going on there, Star? What's that balance is needed for both in that
case? So here's the answer to that, Tim. So with the symptoms that women are experiencing, such as those vasomotor, hot flashes, night sweats, etc., estrogen.
Okay. I got to stop you one more time. You're just too intelligent for me, Star. You got to remember, I'm just a simple Central Nebraskan. What was that?
Vasomotor. Yeah, it's
okay,
a term. Yeah, it's a term for hot flashes and night sweats. So vasomotor is just a term for hot flashes and night sweats. So estrogen is very effective in managing those symptoms in women who have them. But what they noticed when the estrogen was out and available in the 40s and 50s is that people who had an intact uterus were getting uterine cancers or uterine-related issues. Progesterone is absolutely necessary to protect the uterus. So progesterone is a very protective agent to protect the woman against any kind of uterine issues. It has its benefits. It's a very calming hormone. But when we speak about those night sweats and hot flashes, estrogen is the one who's doing the great chunk of the work, and progesterone is really helping to kind of protect the uterine lining from any adverse events.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. So Bob, I kept seeing you. Bob calls himself the data man. That's one of his nicknames. So I kept seeing you nod your head when Star was talking about how that study of women's health initiative was constructed, what it comprised of. What leaped out to you from that in terms of as she talked about the groups that were studied and how it was approached?
Star makes a great point when she said that the women who were receiving the treatments were on average way older than women seeking treatment. So, unfortunately right there, you've got a basic flaw in the design of the experiment, and nobody comments about that. They just say, oh, look at all the problems that women are having. And we don't know if they were having problems because they delayed treatment too long or something. Who knows? So it's kind of like an invalid study, I would have to say, because it wasn't testing what needed to be tested. Yeah, so that's what I think about. I mean, I always love to see that there's data involved, and then I always look at the quality of the data. Is it any good? Is it relevant? Because we've seen so many studies over the decades, that studies on every field of science, where they were irrelevant because of the assumptions made and the way the design was. So that's what jumped out at me. I like the way the Star put it. She pointed out that, and that's also that shows us how the whole of society developed this negative view off of one study, which big study, but if you're having inappropriate conclusions based on, I would say, flawed experimental design, then
recently there's this black label that came off for recently. I want you to explain what a FDA black label is, and then what practical things happen that changed our thinking on this hormone replacement.
And this is actually addressing what Bob was sharing about study designs. The study of the Women's Health Initiative, it was out to answer a different question. It was more to answer a question, can it prevent heart disease in postmenopausal women? It was completely trying to look at a different question. Not exactly what we are trying to determine if this drug is safe or not safe in a specific group of population. So when that announcement came out in 2002, shortly after, a black box was put, meaning this strongest FDA warning on hormone therapy options, that you may see an increase in breast cancer, blood clots, strokes, even dementia, meaning like people who have cognitive issues. So strong black box was put on it. Once the black box was put on it, additional analyses started to get done on this specific study, where the age of women in this study, Tim, were from 50 to 79. So what they wanted to look at is, what were the results in the group of women from 50 to 60? Yes, the average age was 63. We get that. But what if we look at the outcomes of specifically the group of women who are 50 to 60? Was it safer? Was it the same? What were the results? Studies showed that the results were dramatically different compared to that average statement that came out. The risk of developing any of these conditions was far less in this smaller age or younger age, if you want to call it, from 50 to 60, than those women who are up to the age of 79 starting on hormone replacement therapy. So we got a lot more data and analysis on this group of women from 50 to 60. And then from that point on, there were additional studies that were conducted, whether for women taking transdermal formulations of estrogen therapies, not this oral version, and what the results were. Evidence was clearly showing that the risk was not as high as what they thought it was. Yeah, Val?
Could you just talk about the different modes of delivery so our audience can really understand that there's a bunch of different ways to take these hormones?
Yeah, we are so fortunate to have so many different modes of delivery of these hormone therapies. So we all know about the oral formulation. And even with the oral formulation, I'm going to complicate things by throwing in a word called bioidentical. So the formulations that we have different preparations of estrogen and progesterone. Some of them are structurally and chemically identical to what the natural body makes. That's what the bioidentical is. And the other ones are like, for example, the ones that are made from the pregnant horse, the urine of the pregnant horse. So there's different formulations that we have. And aside from that, we have different modes of delivery. We have patches that you can put on. We have gels, sprays, creams. We even have vaginal preparations that you can apply in the vaginal tissue area. So the modes of transportation, are so many. And we have a lot of alternatives depending on what is appropriate for the woman of choice.
Okay. So since you went down that bioidentical path,
Sure.
we're going to stay there for a moment.
Okay.
Which is, how do we know they're bioidentical? Are they still made from synthetic things? So there was one study that says you have synthetic vitamin C, which one could say is identical to vitamin C. And it was shown that in that particular study, that synthetic vitamin C did not cure scurvy, but the real vitamin C did. So how do we know these? So what do we really mean by bioidentical there? Are they synthetically bioidentical, or are they natural things that are bioidentical?
Okay. So let's put it this way. So all hormone therapy is synthetically modified to create the tablets, the creams. They're all synthetically still modified. You're not going out there getting a plant and eating it. There is a synthetic chemical process that goes to get the compound that we need. So one way of getting it, the bioidentical ones that we talk about, is using plants like yams. We use the plants to extract the compound. We synthesize it in such a way, we manipulate it in such a way that the final chemical structure of what that estrogen or the progesterone looks like is identical to what our body makes. So we take the plant, we synthetically modify it in a lab. So it's not like you're eating the plant by itself. You modify it to get this chemical structure that's identical to what we make. Whereas when we talk about, for example, the synthetic hormone estrogen that's from the urine of the pregnant horses, that has a whole bunch of different estrogen formulations in there that are not identical to what our bodies make. They are still estrogen, containing hormone therapies, but they're not chemically identical to what we make. So that is what bioidentical means, that the structure is identical to the ones that we make. Okay. I hope that was clear and not too complicated.
Very good.
Because we went from what the Women's Health Initiative study was looking at, which was, did hormone therapy trigger an increase in these type of diseases in women that were taking it? We went to another study that looked at a broader range with some different times of delivery and said, no, it doesn't. But what we didn't make that direct bridge between what we said the challenges of menopause are, and of those challenges of menopause, what is hormone therapy really meant to address in those challenges?
If you don't mind, Tim, I'm going to go back to the study again, because there's one point I really want to make clear on this call. So, and it's regarding a statistical term that I'm going to use, which is called relative risk versus absolute risk. This is very important. Okay. And the reason I want to spend a couple of minutes on this is when the data came out, they were talking about increased relative risk of breast cancer, clots, stroke, etc. Relative risk. This relative risk way of presenting data is not the best way to present it for conditions that are very rare. So breast cancer in general is not that common. Yes, it happens in women, but it's considered rare. It's not that common. So any additional cases that you notice take place, relatively, it's a very large percentage. But in terms of absolute numbers, it's not that many. And so one example, when the data came out, they said hormone therapy causes an increased relative risk of breast cancer by 26%. That 26% is a very large number to anybody who doesn't even know any math or statistics. It's a very large number. But what it's comparing is one small number to another small number. What they actually noticed was additional 8 breast cancer cases over 10,000 women. That's what that 26% was showing. Had they put a different context into the representation of what the data showed, not representing or showing it with a relative risk of 26% increase versus 8 additional cancer incidences over a course of, however number of years of 10,000 women who were taking it. So I really want to put this out there so women and men or anybody who's listening to this, they could understand what the data was actually showing. And using relative risk is not the best way to represent data for a condition that is not very common, such as breast cancer. And you want to look at those absolute changes, not the relative.
Is that because the numbers of the number 26% is there, people are using that number because it seems like it amplifies the problem? And
exactly. When you hear,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bob.
What I heard and what you said was that if there's so few cases, additional cases, if people knew that, they'd say, wow, people are getting hit by buses at a rate higher than that or something. So anyway.
Yeah. But now, and then we still got to go to the thing of what it's really meant to address, but going on this a little bit longer. So the later studies looked at a different age grouping, also looked at different types of hormones therapy. Did they show a change in the relative risk?
Definitely. Well, I'm not going to say definitely. We no longer start using relative risk in these study populations because it's not the best way to communicate. So we are actually using the data in terms of absolute risks, in terms of how many cases are we actually seeing.
Okay. So if we want to be that precise, Star, if we can be that precise, did they show a change in the absolute?
There are still risks associated with hormone therapy. Hormone therapy is not benign treatment. It's not like a sugar pill everybody should be on. I mean, yes, there are a lot of groups of physicians, even various social media influencers who say everybody and their mother should be on hormone therapy. Hormone therapies have risk. So there are increased risks, and it really depends on, again, the age when you started, time since menopause, and what other baseline health conditions do you have. So there is a lot that goes into it, but there is still a risk. It is not a sugar pill.
Did the absolute risk remain the same as well, or did it change?
Are you referring to the recent studies, or are you talking about the Women's Health Initiative?
Recent studies, subsequent studies with different hormone therapies. And I do appreciate you saying, because people should know that it is a risk. The risk still exists. But I'm wondering, was it shown to be more recent studies where they still was an absolute risk still the same, that it was 8 in 10,000, or did it show the absolute risk was 15 in 10,000, or did it show it was 2 in 10,000, if you have that information?
Now I see where this question is coming from. Well, it depends on the studies that were published. I cannot say every single study had the exact same type of outcome when they were evaluating whether it's the oral formulations or the transdermal formulations. Those results still vary, but they are definitely not seen to be significantly important in a subset of women who are below the age of 60. So in some, it even showed improvements. There are studies that you even see improvements in less risk, but whatever the data is showing among the different studies, it is not showing it to be that significantly important difference in women who are taking the hormone therapies.
Okay. So now let's go back to the other question. So you're going to take these hormone therapies and you expose yourself to some level of risk. And what is that hormone therapy really meant to address? Meaning when should it be used, and in what cases do you think?
So the best evidence that we have thus far with hormone therapies is showing that it is extremely effective in women who are suffering those night sweats, or hot flashes. That is where the best evidence is. There's also great evidence in prevention of bone loss, in prevention of osteoporosis. So those two, in addition, there's also great evidence of helping with symptoms of vaginal urinary tissue weakening, etc. So these three areas have the best evidence that menopause hormone therapy is effective for. Is it the only option? No. But as far as efficacy, menopause hormone therapy is very effective in these three areas. Bob, you had a question?
Yeah. Well, what percentage of women experience really rough menopausal condition? What percentage is it? Is it small? Is it high? There's women who use hypnotherapy, acupuncture, other modalities besides the hormone therapy to benefit themselves. So I just wanted to see if I could get a little feel from you about percentages.
So sure, let's map it out. So women going through menopause transition, data shows that 80% have symptoms of night sweats, hot flashes, etc. 80%, 20% don't have any symptoms. So it's not like every single woman is going to have a symptom. Of the 80%, who have symptoms of night sweats and hot flashes, about a third or so are considered moderate to severe. They have those symptoms, but it's mild. It's not bothersome so much so that they're losing sleep and all these different, effects that they're seeing. So as it relates to the symptomatology, 80% get symptoms, 20% don't get symptoms. And then just to take a little bit deeper dive regarding the vaginal urinary symptoms that women have, 50% of women have those symptoms. And unfortunately, it's not really discussed too much during doctor's appointments to the degree that it should to get the attention. But we are seeing women having a significant impact in their quality of life as it relates to the vasomotor symptoms, the hot flashes and night sweats, etc., and the vaginal urinary related symptoms.
And then now, Star, we're about to say we're all adults here, but sometimes Bob and I are not. There's two things that you said there: vaginal tissue weakening, vaginal urinary symptoms. Be as blunt as you can on what that is for the male population, Star.
Sure. And this is actually very important to talk about. And I'm glad that you're asking this question. So estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone. Estrogen is a hormone that affects so many parts of our body from head to toe, including the area of the vagina and the urinary tissues. So as we are seeing women go through the menopause transition, women are experiencing vaginal irritation, vaginal dryness, frequent urinary tract infection, thinning of that area, a lot of bothersome symptoms, even leading to difficulties in having intercourse. So there's a lot of discomfort and actual symptoms that come out of that area: thinning, weakening, and needing support. Again, do all women need it? Not necessarily, but you want to treat the ones who do have the symptoms and who are having these kinds of issues going on. And that's when vaginal estrogen therapy is extremely effective in using it for this condition.
What do you think the role of stress is in the experience that women have during their menopause?
Stress has a huge impact on this. This life in a woman's journey is a natural transition, right? We're going from reproductive stage to non-reproductive. It's a natural stage. But there's so much happening at this time. The stress level, whether it's work, relationships, own health issues, things changing, a lot is really weighing on women. And as the body and the brain are getting adapted to this new environment of low estrogen and low progesterone, the nervous system is having a very hard time adjusting. And with the same amount of stress, not even more, that we are experiencing, you are having a lot more difficulty in managing it. And as a result, the stress is leading to even worse night sweats and hot flashes and sleep issues and brain fog, you name it. Stress is really a big one, but it's so multifactorial, includes so many different aspects of what's happening in the life of the woman at this stage. It's not just the menopause. So it is everything else that's happening in their life.
Yeah. So I have a very technical term that I use to describe what happens when a woman first realizes that she's going to be experiencing menopause. And that is the uh-oh phenomenon. Because really, that I call that phenomenon is so prevalent in so many areas of life. Your spouse or your partner says something and you go, uh-oh, or, you feel a headache coming on. Uh-oh. There's so many responses like that. So I would like our listeners to know that if you can understand that if you're going into menopause and you have that kind of response, like, oh, how's my life going to be? This is going to be terrible. I've read all this stuff. It's really bad. I'm going to experience this and that and the other. That's going to drive somebody further into the symptomology, in my opinion. And so if they have this, what I call the true future vision of wonderful experience, the symptoms are mild, there's no big deal, they disappear fast. That's going to make a big difference, in my opinion, how people orient their thinking, how women orient their thinking towards it. And
Absolutely.
their husbands and partners will appreciate it too.
Absolutely. And yes, this conversation is about hormone therapy, and we're discussing hormone therapy here, but this is a time for the woman to really look at everything that's going on in their life. How is their nutrition? How is their sleep? How are their relationships, whether it's with their spouses, their children, their parents, what have you, and really put in additional time and effort into modifying things. You don't take things for granted the way you did for the first 40 plus years of your life. You do need to incorporate changes in how you're living. So yes, hormone therapy is a great option to address some of the symptomatology that we're talking about, but it really requires this holistic approach of helping the women transition through this passage, because at the end of the day, the body is very adaptive. The brain and the body is adaptive. It's not broken. A lot of women think that, oh my goodness, I was good and now I'm broken. You are not broken. You're going through a transition. And a lot of different things need to be revisited, relooked at, not just put a patch on it and go about your day. Really look at the choices you're making in your stress level, Bob, like you mentioned. What's causing that stress? What are some stress reduction activities that you can do, starting from breath work to acupuncture or exercise, anything else in between? So it's a very important time for the women to really relook at what they're doing, why they're doing it, and not just think about, oh, let me just go get the hormone replacement therapy and my brokenness will be fixed. That is not true.
Yeah. And that's really great that the way you talked about it was fabulous, because you're talking about, again, it's a multimodal approach to dealing with this life-changing experience. And so the hormone replacement therapy can be a very big and important component of this multimodal approach. But then you've got the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, all the communication, all these different things at work that the woman can address, like you said, look into what's going on in my life. Where can I eliminate certain things that are like stress inducers for me? So that's a great way to look at it for our listeners, for sure.
Yes. And Tim mentioned this point in the beginning of the call where why can't we just tough out this period? Why can't we just ride it? Why do we even need treatment options? I wanted to kind of shed additional light on that, Tim, where studies have shown women who are having these moderate to severe symptoms for a long period of time tend to have so many other downstream negative effects to their health. If they're not sleeping well, they're going to wake up not feeling motivated to eat well, to exercise, and the choices that they make in their life. It also has an effect on their cardiovascular profile, their cholesterol, lipid profile, they go up the roof. So there are downstream effects that happen if you don't address it.
Right.
And
And so
again, yeah.
so those are good. So I was going to ask you about what are because you put that great context, and you talked about the long-term health and wellness of the female. And so you talked about that and those things that Bob went through and you went through. And now you're talking about the hormonal part of that as well. What other, so the lack of sleep can affect you certainly long term. You also talked about it could be a prophylactic against bone loss and osteoporosis. What are there other things long term that addressing the hormonal changes through therapy can really affect for the long term health? I think, as opposed to just getting past the symptoms change, addressing our long-term health?
So this is where we need more studies to see the longer effects. And quite frankly, that is why the Women's Health Initiative was rolled out, to see, other than symptoms or what have you, can we use hormone therapy to prevent bad things from happening? Can we prevent dementia? Can we prevent any kind of cardiovascular disease? And all of these things are still under investigation. And that is why it's so important to call out that the evidence today shows that hormone therapy is effective to manage your symptoms for that age group that we spoke about without having any contraindications to it.
What was that age group again, Star?
The age group is, you want to be less than the age of 60 when you start, and you want to be within 10 years of your onset of your menopause. That is the age group. It's less than 60 within 10 years of onset of menopause. And it's good. What we're seeing is the benefit outweighs the risk in this group. And again, as long as you don't have any contraindications, which I think is important that we talk about later, this is the group you want to put it. But is it going to prevent any other long-term effects? And more to be determined on this. We need more studies on this.
Okay. So let's go ahead and go on to the contraindications.
Yeah. When we speak about contraindications, this is when that critical conversation needs to take place with the woman going through this menopause transition and their clinician. And the contraindications that the evidence has shown is that you don't want to start hormone therapy in women who have breast cancer, or actually any type of cancer that's estrogen sensitive, because obviously you're taking a hormone that can make it worse. You don't want to start hormone therapy in somebody who has had a stroke. It's going to increase the stroke risk. You don't want to start hormone therapy in somebody who has active liver disease, or they have a coronary artery disease that's considered to be moderate to high risk. These are the group of people, yes, you may be having the symptoms, but hormone therapy is not the right one for you. There are other treatment options available that you should consider. It doesn't mean that you're stuck, there's no option for you. It just means hormone therapy is not going to be the right one for you. You want to look out for other options.
And so that's not our topic today. We'll have to have that topic later on, but just give there's some folks, a person that says, I'm scared. I don't know if I've got cancer, but I'm scared I might have the family history. I don't want to do it. Or someone who says, I have had cancer, or I have had a stroke. Give them a little more hope, just without necessarily expanding on it in great detail. What are other options for people in that state?
Aside from hormone therapy, whether you have the risk factors or somehow you decide you don't want to start hormone therapy, there are other options. The other options include prescription medications. They include cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very effective, by the way. And there's also other modalities that you can use that, for example, acupuncture, some supplements, etc. But with the evidence that's available to us, if somebody is not going to be on hormone therapy, what's considered a good option is that we have prescription medications, 2 that were recently released by the FDA, that are specifically for women who have hot flashes. And they work in the brain to help with the centers that regulate heat. So we have those prescription options. We have certain antidepressant medications used at much lower doses that can also help with the symptoms. And so there are other modalities out there that women can resort to and try and see which one works for them to manage the symptoms.
Bob, did you have a question, Bob, or comment?
No. I was just going to say that it's good to know there's a lot more treatment options. And I just want to come back a little bit to the mind, brain, body connection, making sure that the person's mind is telling the brain what it wants the brain to do. I always say that the mind is talking to the brain if we're smart about it, because the brain is this organ that's sitting there waiting for direction. And if our mind is not telling the brain what we want it to produce, then it's not going to produce it. So if we want the brain to help us with symptoms, we tell the brain, hey, I want you to work this out. And you're the brain, you work it out. I don't have to know how the brain works it out. Just work it out. And I've got so many stories from people who've used that strategy to, direct the brain as to what to do. So women, keep in mind that, talking to your brain about how you want the brain to resolve your symptoms, how you want the brain to minimize your symptoms. It's just a great way to go.
Okay. All right. Now on this, like you said, so you started talking about other medications. I was thinking side effects, which all of them do. But that said, on the hormonal medication, the hormone replacement, same thing. If somebody need to be on them even if you started at age 52, should you stay on it to age 57, to prevent the vaginal tissue deterioration and to prevent say it helps with osteoporosis? How long do we stay on this for? The rest of the life, Star, or what?
That's one of the $1 million questions, to be honest, Tim, that people want to be answered. Again, I'm going to stick what evidence shows. According to evidence, a lot of the information that we have is for women to use these therapies around 5 years or so. So if you start and you're on it for about 5 years, the evidence shows that really the risk isn't that high. There is no direction given on when to stop. There is no cutoff time. Every year when you see your clinician, your provider, you want to assess your risk versus benefit every single year, whether you should continue or not. So given that there's no cutoff, and then we have studies that show within 5 years, if you're taking them, the risk isn't that high. It really leaves everything to discussion on where you are with your baseline and what your symptoms show and whether you want to consider in maybe decreasing the dose over time. So those are all options available that need to be discussed every single year with your provider.
Right, so that's what I was going to ask, and you kind of touched on it. Being my Midwestern self again, do I just go cold turkey on it, or do I recommend working down off the hormones?
And if I could add an addendum to that, Tim, has anybody thought about, you go on hormone replacement therapy for a while, let's say 6 months, and then you wean off of it and stay off of it for a few months and see what impact it has to be off of it? Because I think that we don't do enough of that with our pharmaceuticals. We don't let the body adapt, or we don't, when we're taking those pharmaceuticals, our mind, brain, body connection is saying, hey, these things work. Let's go for it, and then if we took them off and we had the intention of having less symptomology when we went off them, maybe we wouldn't need them anymore. I don't know. And then go back. If we need them, we go back on them. Have you ever thought about that, or do you think it's?
Yeah. So you have a compound tough question there, Stars. Do you ever thought about starts? Do you ever talk about what people you're working with? And we should comment on, this isn't just a philosophical discussion with you. This is the type of work you do with women and look to be engaged on. So do you ever talk about stopping, saying, I'm going to go on for 6 months and then let me not try and do anything after that, see if I should go back? And when it's time to say, hey, I've been on it for 6 years, I want to see if I can get off it, do you just go cold turkey? Or do you recommend weaning yourself off of it?
Okay, great question. So when we have these women who go on these therapies, typically they have moderate to severe symptoms. These are not people who are just like having on and off situations. They are having moderate to severe symptoms. 6 months or a short duration like that is not going to be working for them. And to be honest, when you start someone on hormone therapy, it does take a few months to get to that right dose that you're going to respond to. You usually start low and then you slowly build it up based on whatever their symptoms are, because you want to use the lowest effective dose that's going to manage the symptoms. So it already is going to take at least 4 to 6 months to get to that right dose. Maybe try and fail different formulation, whether it's the cream or the patch, see what works for you. So you're going to get there. And with any kind of pharmacologic therapy that people start on, Bob, it's so important, as you know, to make those lifestyle changes in your life. You can't just rely on medications. You can't. You need to put those lifestyle modifications in there. But what these hormone therapies or any other therapy that's helping to address your symptoms, you're going to sleep better. You're going to feel better. And with the result, you're going to make better choices, whether it's exercising and your stress levels and your nutrition, what have you. So it is something that is going to require prolonged attention because they have side effects too. It's a medication. It has side effects. Women have side effects. And so every time when you have this conversation, it's always risk versus benefit, risk versus benefit. And if you need it, you're going to be on it.
Before you answer Tim's question, I'm just going to jump in here real quick and say thank you so much, because you just have given me a jewel. When people are going on pharmaceuticals, what does that indicate? That indicates that they need to make lifestyle changes. I love that. And I've actually never heard that before. Maybe you have, but to me, it's like clear. Hey, you're going on a pharmaceutical. Guess what? It's time to change your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You can eventually go off the pharmaceutical. Thank you. Okay. Now,
Okay.
Tim's question of how do you get off of it? How do you get off of it in the 6 years?
Getting off of it again, it all depends on how you're doing it. And usually you're going to be on it for a few years realistically as you go modifying the regimen. And then at some point, you do want to get off of it. You don't want to be on hormone therapy forever because, again, as we get more data to see, is it truly going to prevent heart disease, prevent all these conditions, then it's really for symptom management. It's really for symptom management until we get more data.
Then do you wean off or do you just
It's
say,
always weaning off. It's always weaning off. It's always, you don't stop at cold turkey.
I say stop at cold turkey, Star? Come on.
I don't think there's any reason to stop any pharmaceutical cold turkey, really.
No.
It's like as you wean off, I think you're telling the body, look, guess what, brain, we're getting off of this thing, so you got to make up the difference. You got to figure out how to make it work after all these chemicals are gone.
But we're getting close on our time here, Star. But there's one area you wanted to make sure we touched on because we've talked about risk and you don't want to be on it forever, still being evaluated long term. But some of the vaginal estrogen is sometimes seen as being a little less risk on that. So what is this vaginal estrogen and what specific problem is the vaginal estrogen solving?
Okay, so sure, let's talk about that one. So when we talk about hormone therapies, there's two big categories, systemic and vaginal. When we talk about systemic, we're talking about the oral tablets that you take, the patches, things that go into your bloodstream, and they have an effect on the different systemic effects of menopause transition, such as the hot flashes, the night sweats, and I also want to emphasize that people who are taking the systemic formulations also see improvement in the vaginal and urinary symptoms as well. So it affects everything. It's going everywhere. Now, the other type that I mentioned, the vaginal formulation, this is very important to know that women have this option for situation where they don't need it for those hot flashes or night sweats. The main symptoms that they're having is the vaginal urinary issues, such as the dryness, the irritation that we talked about, and the urinary tract infections. So you mainly have those symptoms. You don't have too much of the other symptoms that's really bad for you. Or for women, for example, who are taking other medications for those systemic side effects. But for the vaginal and urinary tissue improvement, it's the low dose vaginal estrogen that is the most effective. And it is so effective in treating the symptoms. It doesn't even have that much side effects in getting absorbed into your blood and causing all those risks that the systemic estrogen causes. So you're not as worried about protecting your uterus anymore. You don't need to take that additional progesterone if you have an intact uterus. The safety profile is very good with the vaginal estrogen, and it's very low dose as well.
Okay. Anything else you want to share about the vaginal estrogen and that approach?
I do actually, and because I want some advice from you, Star, because I have some clients female clients, and they want to talk about that. They want to know what to do and if it can help them in their efforts to be sexually active. And so what advice do you give your older female clients who are looking to improve that quality of life?
Get that question actually a lot, Bob, from the clients that I see, because that area of a woman's body, especially, it does so many different functions, including the pleasure sensors. When we see thinning and weakening of that area and causing more symptoms of such as pain during the intercourse, yes, there are other options available such as lubricants and moisturizers and etc. that can be used, but they don't really address the issue of what is causing that symptoms, which is the thinning of the tissue area over there. And so whatever I speak with the women about the vaginal estrogen preparations, I say if you are having those symptoms and you've tried other modalities such as the moisturizers and the lubricants and etc., definitely try it. Don't be afraid. It doesn't have the risk associated with hormone therapy as other formulations do. There is really hardly anything to worry about. Data also shows, even though this is on a slightly a tangent, but women who have breast cancer are also taking vaginal estrogen for those symptoms. Even in those situations.
Well, when you say they're taking vaginal estrogen for those symptoms, do you mean the vaginal-related symptoms?
The vaginal symptoms only.
So there's a man question. How are they administering it? I'm just wondering. Is
Okay.
it in a cream that they use to put in the area? And how long do they have to wait until after they put it in there to have intercourse? Or what can you tell me about
Great.
that?
So the formulations that we have available, most of them are all bioidentical, meaning the chemical structure is identical to the one that your body makes. So we're going to level set that. There are different formulations. There are suppository tablets that you put up the vagina area and it stays there. There are creams and gels that are also available to apply in that area. And it is generally recommended to do these applications right before going to sleep. You don't want to apply the estrogen or the tablets before you are going to be intimate with your partner because it will rub off on them, as you can imagine. And so you usually want to put it right when you're going to go to sleep overnight. And typically in the morning and throughout the day, things get absorbed and you don't have that available estrogen available to kind of have that cross contamination with your partner. So they're very effective.
Thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
So it's got a much lower risk profile. But now let's just go back to, where in the general hormone therapy, I think you were saying, look, start age 50, 52, start early. If someone has not started then, and let's say they are 62 and they never went on the hormone therapy in general, but they're having the vaginal issues, as we just talked about. Is that a vaginal estrogen still an option for them to consider for that scenario?
When speaking of the vaginal estrogen preparations, that age stratification that we talked about really doesn't apply as much because it doesn't get absorbed in your blood.
Well, boy, if people want to engage with you and benefit from your knowledge and talk some more, one, they can always join our Facebook group where you're a guide over there, which is called the Wellness Circle, found on Facebook by searching the Wellness Wave Club.
Tim, explain what a guide is, because I think if people understand how powerful the information that our guides are producing, these experts providing all this great information, maybe you could comment on.
So what we have over there, we've selected for what we consider some starting very important topics, and one of those, thriving through menopause. We have experts that we have to join that, who serve as guides in that. And what does that guide do? That guide is responsible for educating the population out there, putting forth research, putting forward information to act on, but is also available there to answer questions about a topic on that. So Star is our guide for that lane over there, thriving through menopause. But now, if they want to bypass us and go directly to you, Star, how can they reach you?
They could definitely just DM me, and I also have a website that they can refer to. But I highly want them to engage through this WellWaveNOW platform, because whatever questions or whatever ideas that they have, I'm sure a lot of women are also going to resonate with. So feel free to comment on those weekly posts that we put out there to educate, to inform, to inspire, and then we can start the community. But yes, I am available through the social media, and you can reach out to me and I can be more than happy to address any questions.
Yeah, I think there's at least 4,000 people in that wellness circle, and more than half are women. So if our women in that group knew that they had access to an expert like yourself, that would be, to answer questions, how good is that? That's so great. So thanks for being one of our guides, really.
My pleasure.
Right. Appreciate it, Star. Bob, always pleasure. So thanks for being with us here. Learned quite a bit today. I'm glad, kind of having this kind of frank, open discussion. And so most people have been making decisions about hormone therapy based upon a simplified version of the story. What we have explored today is something different, how to actually think about it with current information. So if this is helpful, if this helped clarify something for you, you can subscribe to the Wellness Wave Club on a YouTube channel. Share this with someone who wants more clarity on what hormone therapy is and how it affects the person. And as we just talked to, you want to continue discussion with Star, you can go on and join us in the Wellness Circle, which can be found which is our private Facebook group, found by putting in the Wellness Wave Club in Facebook and find it.